Hi, welcome to a conversation with Jean Luen Yang, Censorship in Leander, Texas. I'm Nora Pelizzari, the Director of Communications for the National Coalition Against Censorship, and I'm excited to be your moderator tonight. A quick note, time permitting, we will have an open Q&A at the end of this panel, so please add your questions to the comment section, and we'll do our best to respond to as many as we can. Before I ask our panelists to introduce themselves, I would like to thank all of the organizations, libraries, schools, bookstores, publishers, and individuals who are participating in Banned Books Week, which officially kicks off this Sunday, September 26th. Thank you for supporting the right to read and showing the world that books unite us, censorship divides us. So without further ado, let's meet our panelists, Jean, Alexis, and Stephanie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jean Luen Yang. I have to be honest, I feel a little weird that my name is biggest on the title card thing, because I feel like out of all of us here, I probably have the most narrow amount of knowledge. I think all I can really speak to is the perspective of censorship from the eyes of an author, right? I am a cartoonist. I write and draw comic books and graphic novels. The book I'm probably most well known for is this one right here, American Born Chinese. Last year, I had two books come out, Superman Smashes the Klan from DC Comics, which is drawn by the amazing Guri Hiru, and Dragon Hoops, which is my first nonfiction graphic novel. Excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Hello, everyone. I am Alexis Huddleston, and I am a high school English teacher in Leander, Texas, which is just north of Austin, Texas, if you don't know. And I'm just excited to be here and kind of share my own experience that Stephanie and I have gone through with censorship, and also very grateful that Gene is here because we love his work in Leander ISD and his perspective is super valuable. So I'm just glad you're here, Gene.
Hi, I'm Stephani Bercu. I am a mom of two high schoolers, and I volunteer a lot at schools and help out throughout our district. And then I'm very passionate about reading and literacy, and get very frustrated when books are removed from choices and other people are censoring my kids. I have a problem with that. And so I've been working really hard with a group of our teachers and a few other parents to really try and stop some of the censorship in our district.
Great, thank you. So, you know, a lot of us in the free speech community have been very aware of Leander, Texas for a little while now, but maybe for our audience, we could start with just talking about what happened in Leander. Alexis, can we start with you?
Yeah, so a few years ago, Texas adopted some new standards for English and for high school English specifically. And so the district decided a couple years ago, Leander ISD decided to rewrite the curriculum to meet those new standards. And so we spent about 2 years, last year and the year before, working on that curriculum, but last year was the first year we rolled it out. And part of that curriculum was using reading writing workshop, which a lot of English teachers are familiar with, but is really about promoting choice, both in reading and what students are writing, and trying to make those experiences more authentic. And so last year, we also decided we have 2 book clubs per grade level, and one in the spring and one in the fall. And so we rolled out our first fall book club, which looked a little different than normal because we were in a hybrid teaching scenario. But we rolled that out, and around that time, we started getting complaints at board meetings about books. And so it started really with just parents or community members coming in, and which I'm sure we've all seen similar things now at board meetings across the country, but reading a salacious excerpt from a book out of context, and then kind of using some aggressive language like calling it pornographic or things like that. And we even had at one of our particular board meetings, a sex toy brought in and used as a prop. So that kind of kicked everything off, and our district responded not by telling them to use the policy we already had in place to file a complaint about a book, but instead they said that, well, we didn't really vet these books well enough, so now we're going to review all of them. So we went into an 8-cycle process of people signing up. Anyone who wanted to sign up could. to review the books, and then you were assigned a book for each unit. And so it would be like the English 1 fall unit. You get assigned a book, you read it, and then you meet with a group of other people, which could be made up of parents, community members, other teachers, people from the district, talk about the book, and then everyone individually fills out a form and says, do we think this book is appropriate? And so we've had a lot of conversations around that idea of appropriateness. And we had certain criteria we were looking at, but they were kind of vague. And so through that process, we had, I believe the total was 19 paused or removed books that came out of that. And they would publish like the summaries of it, and the summaries didn't necessarily add up. So it would say like 90% wanted to keep this book in, but for some reason that one's removed. And so a lot of what we've been trying to do is kind of figure out like what is actually going on here, who's making these decisions, so that we can appropriately respond to them and try to kind of target where we need to. So that's an ongoing issue that we're still dealing with, and that we're going through another cycle of review now that just opened up to decide if ultimately those books will be officially removed from the curriculum.
Yeah, and I'll add that we had a lot of positive steps forward last year in our district. They approved with a lot of contention, but they did ultimately approve a gender neutral dress code that applies across the board to all students. It protects the right to dress as the gender you identify with. Huge success, but there was a lot of contentious speakers about that. Followed up with some of our diversity, equity, and inclusion discussions, which as of the beginning of this year, we've got a DEI policy now, and they've got a spot in funding for a DEI officer, which are really good things. And about the time those things passed was when the book stuff really got started. It was literally in one of the same meetings. And it's very interesting that the categories of people that were removed, their stories removed, where you're looking at BIPOC individuals, LGBTQ representation, as well as a lot of representation of women who are assaulted or abused. And that pretty much, I think, catches every single book, if I'm not right. And so just trying to get out there and get the correct narrative for some of the books and get involved. And I did have my oldest was in high school last year as well. And 4 of his selections were gone by the time he got to the second semester. And that was pretty frustrating for me.
It's interesting, Stephanie. I think that's something that I maybe want to come back to at the end, that you talked about the steps forward that the district has made. And it seems like, and this is something we're seeing kind of across the country, that these book challenges are being used as a tool to push back against that kind of pendulum swing, which obviously makes our students and our schools kind of collateral damage. So we'll come back to that maybe. But I'm interested in how this type of book challenge affects teaching beyond just kind of the specific titles on the challenge list. So at NCAC, we often talk about a chilling effect when books are banned for any reason, but particularly political reasons, in terms of making teachers kind of tread cautiously when it comes to topics that they're concerned might raise controversy. So I'm wondering if you've witnessed that in Leander and what the impact has been on teachers.
Yeah, I think it's been, we've kind of seen a lot of different things that have come out of it. I think teachers, especially with this happening alongside some of we're in Texas, so some of the laws that we've seen passed about anti-CRT and things like that, which, not that we were teaching that before, but I think a lot of people are just kind of in this environment where they feel like if they say the wrong thing, then at any moment, you might be basically in trouble. So especially last year when we were teaching and half of our students were on Zoom, I think that's part of the reason why we saw this issue come up last year, is that for the first time ever, parents are involved to a level that they've never been involved before in their students' education. And I think a lot of it had to do with the way parents reacted to things rather than students, because I mean, I had no book complaints last year. from my students we had one book complaint at our entire campus last year. And that didn't escalate beyond a conversation between the parent and the teacher. But I think it definitely has this effect on us because you're nervous, but then on top of that, it's exhausting to fight all the time for what you know is right. Like, it's just hard because, I mean, you're going to meetings all the time and you want to participate in all the things that can save the books, and you want to go speak at the board meetings and write the board. And that's a lot of extra labor that you're taking on in addition to your teaching job. And then we kind of see how that affects the kids as well. Like, I had a student last year who had written to me in a current events response and said that they were a closet Trump supporter, was how they described themselves. And I taught freshmen last year. So this was a 14-year-old white boy, cisgender, heterosexual. And he chose to read None of the Above by I.W. Gregorio for our book club option, which I was kind of surprised about because it's not typically a book that you would think that boys would choose. And at the end of the unit, we had them write book reviews, and he wrote this amazing review about how he thought everyone should read the book because people didn't know enough about the intersex experience, how he learned so much from it, how people needed to be more open-minded. And I think that's the effect we're seeing is students just don't have that opportunity. They've had this story taken away from them as an option that they may have been interested in, and it could have kind of expanded their worldview, and that's not there anymore. And then as teachers, that's a lot of the way that we can have those conversations and help students deal with and process those issues, is because it first starts with a book that brings it up for them. And then through the activities we do in class, through the conversations they have with other students, through the writing we do, they're able to process that and come to a new understanding. And that's so much harder when we have a limited set of stories that we can offer them and a limited set of viewpoints, because like Stephanie said, so many of those stories that we lost were, I mean, I think it was maybe only like 2 stories out of the 19 that didn't involve a person of color, an LGBTQ plus person, or a story of sexual assault. And that's just really hard to see the kids not have that option. And for some kids, that they're upset because that's representation for them. And then on the other hand, we have these kids who that is their way into seeing something else, and they just lost that opportunity.
That's devastating. And so thank you for the teacher's perspective. So I would like to now think about, how this type of attack on what was essentially a whole curriculum, right? We're more used to seeing book challenges come in kind of one book at a time. But this is a challenge on a whole curriculum, which was designed to include more diverse voices. So how does that type of attack impact students kind of while it's happening? I wonder if Stephanie, as a parent, we could start with you.
Well, I know, like, for instance, I mentioned that 4 of the graphic novels from the graphic novel unit my son had were pulled. Not sure that he would have read them, but 2 of them were LGBTQ stories. And we have seen time and time again, it's not just the books. We had a meeting, the primary focus, at least for parents in the audience, was COVID and do we mask or not mask? And people got up and said transphobic things. So they're not just removing the books, they are actively targeting our marginalized communities. But it's not just at the school district. We are in our 3rd special session, and they're targeting LGBTQ students in our government. They failed, 3 times, and they're back at it with the exact same bill again. And so, I know, at least as far as the Trevor Project's concerned, anytime these discussions are happening in the Capitol, their numbers are increasing. So I can only imagine the stress and unease it's building in those different communities. My kids are sick of hearing me talk about books because I've made it a goal to work my way through all the banned or pulled books. I've been at the board meeting once when one of them I'd read was talked about and I hadn't spoken yet. So I changed my talk and was like, let me give you the whole picture of this book and why I think this book is amazing. And I would totally let my, at the time, sophomore read it. And so I think that it's just kind of the whole, I think that the environment, like the kids themselves are awesome. I know that a lot of our supportive places on campus have experienced high numbers this year, which I think is amazing. But I do think it's, our students are doing a much better job than the adults at being accepting and loving and empathetic people. And I think too, that might be hard for some parents who don't have that understanding and empathy to realize it, and they think that it's the books causing it and not the learning about the other person's point of view.
Yeah, we've seen students come speak at board meetings as well. And a majority of the students who have come out and spoken have spoken in favor of having the books as options. And just from my own observations on campus of when the topic comes up, like some students are aware that it's happening, some aren't. But when it comes up, most of the kids, regardless of whatever their political background is, they're usually like, well, that's dumb. Like, if they don't want to read a book, they're not going to read it anyway. So, I mean, for the most part, the students are very good at self-censoring. Like, they know if this topic is not good for me. I mean, we usually ask them before they even choose books, like, is there anything you don't want to read about? And they're like very quick to say if there are any topics they don't want to read about. And if they come across those in their reading, I mean, they will let you know, and they will easily find another book. So for the students, I think they also feel like, I don't really understand why this is happening, because they don't really see it as an actual issue in the classroom, because they're like, well, the only kids reading those books are kids who want to read those books. So especially because with a book club unit, it's all choice. So they have 15 different choices in every unit. And if for whatever reason, all 15 of those choices aren't a good fit for them, the teacher just works with the family to find a good fit. So I think for the most part, they're like, I don't really understand what all the fuss is about, because I've never experienced any issues with this. But for those of them that want to have access to those specific books that they no longer do, that's really frustrating, because they're like, well, I mean, I've had students last year who were, when In the Dream House got pulled, or we had 2 graphic novels featuring LGBTQ plus characters. I mean, they were like, that's me. I've never gotten to read a story about me in school before. And they are like, I really would like to read it. And of course we can still like help them get access to the book, but it really sucks that they don't have access to that in the classroom during class when they have this time set aside to read and discuss it.
Thank you. Jean, 2 of your books were on the Leander reading lists, American Born Chinese and Dragon Hoops. Fortunately, they were retained, but this is not the first time your work has been challenged. This is your old hat at this. So how does this kind of response, this censorious approach to your work, how does it impact you? And what effect does it have on the work that you make?
I do have to say, so I was a high school teacher for 17 years in Oakland, California. I taught computer science though, so it's a different set of issues. I do think that there is some overlap between computers and technology and books, and it's this. Nowadays, in the internet age, you just can't keep, you can't keep information from your kids. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't work. Like, they can go to any computer and they can look up any information in a book versus information on the internet. And I would say the difference is this: the information on the internet is often fast. It is designed to be consumed quickly. It often was created very quickly with very little editorial oversight, whereas books are slow. Like books, even a graphic novel, which some people say, takes a couple hours to read, it still takes a longer time than something that you would find on the internet to consume. And the creation of the book, I can tell you from being an author, it is so slow. It's like crazy slow. Because it's slow, it forces you to think about it a lot, and it forces you to think in a nuanced way. So I would argue that when you're talking about a topic, right, you can either go to the internet and get a very, very fast, often unnuanced version like an examination of that topic, or you can go to a book and you can get a very slow, very deliberate, like a very thoughtful discussion of that topic. And when you ban a book, what you're doing is you're banning the nuanced version of that discussion, right? You're not banning what's on the internet. You're just banning the version that somebody slaved over for years. You're not banning the version that somebody put up in like 3 minutes or 5 minutes of typing on a computer. So I think you have to be clear about that. When you're banning a book, you are not banning a topic from entering into a student's head. You're just banning like a nuanced discussion of that topic. Now, for my book, I think out of all of my work, the book that gets challenged the most is American Born Chinese. And I have to be honest, I have a lot of compassion for the people who challenge it. Often it's like it gets challenged because I use satire in the book, right? I have a character in that book who is the embodiment of all of the negative Asian and Asian American stereotypes that I've encountered in my own life. It's sort of like me taking my childhood trauma and sticking it on the page and drawing it out on the page. And some of the feedback that I've heard is within some communities, after the book is read, sometimes like a certain pocket of that community will see the contents of my book as almost like a how-to manual for how to bully another corner of that same community, right? So, and when I hear that, it's like heartbreaking. Like that was not the intention behind the book at all. So I think ultimately as an author, like when we put work out into the world, we cannot control 100% how the book is read. I would argue that you shouldn't even try to control 100%, how a book is read, because the book itself is an interaction. It's a discussion between the author and the reader. There's always the danger that what you put out will be taken the wrong way. But I think that for American-born Chinese specifically, like if you take it off the table because it uses satire, and because satire, if it's misinterpreted, can be hurtful, what you're doing is you're saying that satire as a literary device, as a tool, is reserved for the majority, right? Like people with minority experiences shouldn't use it because of the possibility that you might be adding pain. I really think the solution is reading has to happen within a community. Like I like it best when my books are not just read by a single person, but are read by a community, and where the discussion doesn't begin and end in the pages of my book, where my book is part of a larger discussion that a community is having. So that's what I hope would happen, right? I hope rather than pulling my books off of lists, pulling any books off of lists, the community can figure out what's the discussion that this book can be a part of.
So why, I mean, in this case, there are several graphic novels that were on the hit list in Leander. What do you think it is about comics that makes them such an easy target of censors? Jean, let's start with you.
I think it's because you can just flip through it and see something that you might find offensive, right? Because it's visual. And I think that's one of my favorite things about comics, is that it has these two elements. It has the text, and then it also has the images. And when I'm creating a book, I actively think about the difference between those two ways of communicating. How, like, the rough rule of thumb that I follow is, for emotions, for example, if there is an emotion that is a little bit more nuanced, that I want to get into the reader's mind, to get into the reader's heart, I'll often communicate that through the text. I think text is a better tool for that. But if there's something visceral, that it's almost like an emotion that I want to put into the reader's gut without it going through their brain, I'll often do it through the image. That's the power of the image. It's incredibly visceral, it's incredibly immediate, but that also works to the disadvantage of graphic novels when it comes to censorship, because you can just flip through it and you can experience the visceralness of that image without context.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of it, is that it's a visual, you just see it. And I know like one of the big ones that was challenged was the graphic novel adaptation of Handmaid's Tale. And I had to look a long time to find what was so offensive for juniors and seniors in high school, who I'm pretty sure probably watched the Hulu series. And compared to the Hulu series, or even, it's graphic, but it's not inappropriate for that age group. I actually thought those were very modest scenes for what they could have been. And looking, at the characters, it's a very modest society where all that horrible violence happens. And so I think they pick and choose like the images, and it's one of the images that is made to just, like you said, viscerally attack your gut. And Jean, thank you. You brought up some awesome points I hadn't thought about before. So I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, it's been interesting to see the graphic novels. I mean, we even had one that the grandson adaptation of The Lottery, which is a story that my kid read in 8th grade or 7th grade, removed because there was a cartoon drawing of a woman taking a bath. And I'm like, but that's just a human body. Like, we're talking about high schoolers. We're not, but it wasn't even like, I don't know. I don't understand it, but I think it is that visual connection. It just feels different to people's guts when they see something.
I think there's one other element of it too, which I know the first unit that we ever reviewed as a district was our graphic novel unit. We have a sophomore unit that is entirely made up of graphic novels. And one of the first complaints came from educators within the district about the rigor of the graphic novels. And so that's another complaint that we see about graphic novels or comics, is that they're not rigorous enough, which I think is, we have this culture where if it's not a classic, or if the lexile isn't a certain level, then it's not difficult enough. But if the content of it itself is difficult and students are doing rigorous work with it, I mean, I could have students do rigorous work with a picture book, because I don't teach books, I teach skills. So if I'm teaching them analysis, we can practice analysis with all kinds of things. We can practice synthesizing with all kinds of texts. And so that's one of those major issues that has come up as well when it comes to graphic novels and comic books, is just they're not rigorous enough, which I think is really a misconception, and also just totally discounts the amount of work, like you were saying, Jean, that even goes into making one. Like there's another, in my opinion, there's another level of analysis we can do on a graphic novel or a comic book that we can't do on a non-visual medium, because we have both these images we can analyze and these words that we can analyze. And I mean, realistically, we need to even teach kids how to read a graphic novel, because so many of them read it so quickly because they're just reading the words and flipping through, or just looking at the pictures. And there's really a lot of complex thought that's going along with being able to take in both of those things fully and understand what are the different messages I'm getting from both of these to form a better picture of the overall text. And I think it's really sad that we have so many educators and non-educators who look at graphic novels. I mean, this has been going on for so long, to discount comics and graphic novels, and it's just sad that we haven't made more progress on it at this point.
I think that's a great point that Alexis made about comics sometimes being seen as not rigorous. And it is true that if you take a 300-page prose novel and a 300-page graphic novel, that for most people, most readers, it would be faster, it would be quicker to read the graphic novel than the prose novel. But at the same time, we are surrounded by visual media, right? We're surrounded by visual communication, and visual communication critically. I think it's sometimes easier for us to, quote unquote, believe what we see, whereas when we read, we tend to think about it more critically. One of the places that I think graphic novels have in the modern American classroom is Graphic novels are a great way to teach students how to think critically about what they see, how to think critically about images, how to not accept them at face value. And that requires a slow reading of a graphic novel.
So, I mean, I feel like that was a great defense of teaching graphic novels in the classroom. But since comics have been specifically kind of singled out, it seems, in this review of the book list and Leander, what steps have educators had to take to ensure that comics remain on reading lists at all?
I know we've had, like, I work with a very experienced AP Lang teacher, and part of AP Lang is really centered around rhetorical analysis, and analysis of images is included in that. I know we often think of like political cartoons as that's something that comes up in teaching all the time. I mean, in history classes, we look at them in English classes, and I think when we have conversations where we're showing like, hey, this is actually very complex. Like there's a lot that we have to break down to fully understand this image and the message, then it becomes more clear that there is rigor and there is complexity in graphic novels or comics or visual mediums that we're using. And so a lot of it that we've worked with CBLDF to like try to make some connections with people too, because I think we really kind of have to do almost a mindset shift about what comics and graphic novels are, because in reviewing the English 3 unit, I was assigned V for Vendetta. And when my group met to discuss it, the first thing that everyone agreed on was this book is really tough. Like this is complex. It's hard to keep track of the characters. Like a lot of them look very similarly because they all work for the government and they're wearing similar things. And like it's hard to track that. And then there's lots of different kind of like side storylines. And in having that conversation, we came to the realization like this is a graphic novel, but we almost would need to make sure students knew when they picked this isn't going to be an easy read for you. Like this is a complex story. And I really think the biggest thing that we have to do is we just need to get those comics into more people's hands. And we really just need to expand the number of people who are reading comics and graphic novels, because I think once you start reading them, you realize just how amazing they are and how much you can get from them. And so part of that has just been like, okay, let's bring awareness to the issue, because I think some people automatically assume, because I think of comics and I think of these short little serialized comics, that they're not really considering all that goes into that, some other formats that we have. And so it's really just like, let's educate people first, because I think that takes care of a lot of the issue. And honestly, the number one thing we see checked out in our school library is manga. Like the kids are, like check out like 10 books of it at a time. And they just all go through they're already drawn to the medium anyway. So what more could we want than kids to be reading? And if that's what they want to read, like we need to make sure it's in their hands, because we have so many students tell us every year, I'm not a reader, I don't read books. And they don't even, honestly, they don't even think of those books as books. And I'm like, no, that is a book. Like you've read so many books this year. And if we really want people to believe, we really want students to believe they're readers, we have to make that mind shift for them and for the community as well.
Stephani, how has the censorship issue in Leander evolved from kind of reading lists to classroom libraries and school libraries, and where are we now?
So yeah, that's been very interesting. So it started with the reading list, and once they felt like they had good traction and there wasn't really much else to do, all of a sudden it was like, oh, this book is accessible through the library, but that never went anywhere. And just coming back, I think it was like the second or third board meeting this year was when they pulled out the most recent challenged book, Lawn Boy by Jonathan Evison. And I think that was a classroom, it was either a library book or a classroom library book. And a parent pulled that book out, read excerpts, had lovely signs for her student to hold while she read this book with him standing next to her that she felt was inappropriate for him. And so I think it's the grasping at straws, we didn't get enough of what we wanted removed. And here's another story. I made sure to take time and read that one because it's the hot topic this year. And it was actually a really great coming out story. There was a lot of nuance, and, the scene they read, it sounds horrible if you only hear like that 2 sentences out of the whole book, but it's a recurring image throughout the book because you've got a person that is really grappling with their sexuality and who they are. And that's like their constant that they keep coming back to until they finally figure out who they are. And so was it graphic? Was it something that makes people uncomfortable? Yes, but it wasn't gratuitous. There was an actual point and you can follow it. And I think right now it's just at the point where they're doing whatever they can, one, to get attention across the board, whether it be our district or one of the 2 or 3 districts next door to us where books are also being challenged. It's really an attention grab. It's trying to get their names out there. They're, connecting, getting the clips online through the school board meeting, and then they're getting sent to Daily Wire. They're getting sent to Mass Resistance. And so I really do think it's just that they're uncomfortable with the change. I think it's a growing pain, and they stopped getting traction with the classroom books because now even people that maybe were uncomfortable with some of the books are like, well, we've already reviewed them all. Why are you still bringing up those books? And so now they've shifted. And their common thing is, we're not trying to ban books. We just don't think it should be part of the curriculum. And they told us that, and within, I think, 3 months, they were attacking the library books. Because it's not enough that it's out of the book club list, it can't still be on campus in any form. And I was like, I think my favorite phrase has been taken from Princess Bride. You keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. And yeah, so I think it's just kind of a grasp at straw and a way to get their 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah, I think at this point, our librarians are nervous, I would say, because librarians are notoriously anti-censorship. It's kind of part of what they do. And I feel like when people have shifted now from our curriculum, because first it was easy to say, well, it's in the classroom and you're teaching it, because also that's part of the issue is that people don't understand what teachers do, because teaching has changed a lot. Even from when I was in high school, a little over 10 years ago, teaching has changed a lot. And so I'm not reading every single one of these book club books out loud to the class and having a class discussion about it. They're choosing a book to read, reading it and interacting with the text on their own, analyzing it in a group, doing activities with it. And I'm teaching them the skill. So I'm saying, okay, we're going to practice doing whatever this is today. Now you practice that in your book. And so I think when parents think of what we do, or community members think of what we do, they think to their own experience, which was, let's read The Great Gatsby or The Scarlet Letter or Romeo and Juliet or whatever it was out loud. You're going to take chapter quizzes or act quizzes, and then at the end, you're going to write an essay and take a big, long multiple choice test. And that's just not, that is not rigorous. I don't know that I really learned anything from my English classes in high school that is a skill that I use in my day-to-day life now. I remember learning gerunds, and I remember taking multiple choice tests, and I remember I learned how to write a 5-paragraph essay, but I don't do any of those things now. And I teach the same subject I went through. So I think when they realized that wasn't going to work, okay, we got at least a little of what we wanted. Now they're moving on to libraries, and we're seeing it escalate. And I think we're having bigger communities like librarians having to be worried about it, because for the first time, people are turning their eye, and we know they're not really reading these books and really thinking about the context of them. So, from a First Amendment standpoint, it's scary. We used a lot of the resources from NCAC to share with the board, like this. We are limiting students' First Amendment rights. They should have the option of these choices, and we're taking those away from them. And it's just, we've seen it just get worse and worse, honestly. So it's like every board meeting, oh, okay, now we're on to that. And so it just keeps snowballing.
So, I don't know how much experience you had with combating book challenges and controversies before the last year or so. But you're now officially, as a representative of the National Coalition Against Censorship, I will declare you experts. So what is your advice for other educators and parents and students? Because students should be empowered to advocate for themselves as well. But what is your advice for folks facing censorship in their own communities?
I think the most important thing from my perspective is just about finding your community. There are a lot of wonderful educators and parents and students and community members who have been part of this fight, and you can't do it by yourself. It takes a really long time. Like we're still, like you said, it's been like a year of dealing with this, and there's no end in sight at this point. So it really takes a lot of people, because you get tired. It is the right thing to do, but you need other people to kind of pick up when you can't. And I also think, like Jean was saying earlier, you get to read all of these amazing banned books with a community of people and talk about why they're so awesome and come together about how you're going to defend them. And so you really, like, I've made so many friends through this process that I never would have probably ever gotten to know before had we not come together over this issue. And that's not only helped me get through it, but it's also just been like, it's nice to know you have like-minded people who can support you. And so I think that's the biggest thing. You have to find your community, because you need a united front, and you need the research that every person can do, and the reaching out to all the different organizations, and the reading of all the books that needs to happen. Like, that has to be in community. And so that would be my biggest piece of advice.
As a parent, I think, one, it's important to figure out what the policies and procedures are in your district. Last year, they were there. I happen to be friends with quite a few ELA teachers, so I already knew about them. But, when I think that, one, even parents that want to pull a book because I think it's inappropriate, they need to follow the right guidelines. They need to read the book first. And, with everything we had going on last year, the only book that received a formal challenge was the ABCs of Equality, which is a picture book. As big and loud as they were at the board meetings, none of those parents followed through with a formal complaint, because to do a formal complaint, you have to read the whole book and you have to be able to support your reasons for removal. And so I think that's the first thing. The other thing I've done as a parent, besides showing up and speaking up and trying to hold the board to their own policies and their own procedures, was to get online and, as I read the books, write summaries of the books. Alexis did the same thing. So I would hop on hers and like, "Ooh, I didn't catch that." So you start this whole conversation about the book. And just even at the school board meetings, sometimes, like I know with the None of the Above, I read that after it had gotten spoken about, and I came back another week and I'm like, "Hey, let me tell you, they're saying this is graphic. This is not graphic. This is medically accurate information provided by an actual doctor who is the author, and it's integral to the story." And there was nothing sexual about it at all. And just being able to kind of provide that. And I think too, part of it is learning to ignore when they're loud and obnoxious and maintain your calm. And it's some of the recent ones, people that are new to showing up. And I'm like, well, this isn't how it started. So I've had kind of a slow buildup of being able to ignore them. But at this point, I'm like, they're not going to stop. And I can either feed my anxiety and my worry and my stress by paying attention to them, or I can focus on where I need to put my intent. And, I think too, part of that is supporting the district, speaking out, thanking the board members, thanking the staff that are doing their job, that are following procedures, calling them out when they don't. And I think that was also important, to be like, You have these policies and procedures. And it says right here, while you're reviewing books, they can't be taken away from students. But 4 books got taken away from my student during the review process because it was they reviewed each one, but they called it a cycle, which to me says that's all 8 cycles were the whole process. And I reached out on some of the books that got pulled from my sons, trying to find out what the reason was. If they told me that it didn't meet TEKS, if they told me that it really was more appropriate for younger or older or whatever, I would have been like, oh, cool, that's rational. Move on. Never could get a straight answer on why books were pulled from my student. And like I said, he may or may not wanted to read them, but I read all of them before I started asking those questions at the board. I did appreciate getting involved with our citizen curriculum advisory committee on like a smaller scale. Getting to read those books. What I liked best about the process last year, as problematic as it was we were in groups of 4 or 5, and I got more out of the books because the summaries that we put out had more to do with the discussion we had around the book and less to do with what our personal interpretation of the book was. So I would say volunteer, get involved with the committees that the district has. If you're concerned about curriculum, get involved with their curriculum review. That's something that's always been available for parents.
Thank you. So I want to take a question from the audience, which follows on this question very well, I think, which is, this Leander case, as we refer to these incidents at NCAC, it's a case. The Leander case generated quite a lot of media attention and quite a lot of national media attention as well. So you had a lot of people from outside of the community who were aware of this issue. That isn't always the case with these censorship cases. Much more frequently, they kind of happen very quietly, and they're sort of tempests in a teapot within communities. And maybe no one hears about them and isn't aware that these things happen actually all the time, all over the country, everywhere. So how can people, authors, educators, parents, students outside of Leander best support you and the students now? Jean, could we maybe start with you on this one?
I really appreciated everything that Alexis and Stephanie said. I'm so thankful for people like you and the work that you do. Authors like me can tell our stories. I don't know if I have really specific advice, but I will say this. I think we as a culture, we as a society need to read stories deeply, right? Like we have to interact with stories in a deep way. I think storytelling is like one of the defining features of our species. Like we've been doing it since we've been human beings, and it's critical to our survival. There's an author by the name of Brian McDonald, who I really love very much. He writes a writing craft book called Invisible Ink, where he argues that the stories that really stick with us are the ones that offer some kind of survival information. And it could be physical survival, but more often it's like spiritual survival, right? I think when you miss the point of a book for specific details, for specific images or specific sentences, you're often missing critical survival information. So my hope is that as a culture, we learn to read deeply. We learn to look for that survival information.
I don't know if there's anything specifically you can do to help us, because our fight is specific to our district, but the fight of censorship is not specific to our district. And so honestly, my advice would be, this is happening all over the country, and it's not, the books are part of it, but like Nora said earlier, books are a way that they're trying to grasp onto these other things that they want to accomplish. So it may start as books in your district, it may start as CRT or one of these other like buzzwords that have come up and that have really kind of overtaken school board meetings. And so my advice would really be just get involved in your local community, because they probably need help too. Someone near you probably needs some kind of help. Vote. I mean, school, like we have some wonderful, wonderful people on our school board, and they really are out for what is best for kids, and they're trying to do what's best. But, you know, they have to be there first. So part of it is just voting for the right people to be in the right places. And please just buy these people's books, like buy banned books, because we need people to have a better understanding of them, and we need factual information about them, because a lot of what you see is just sensationalized versions, and it's hard to defend a book if you haven't read it. So I think just reading them and really trying to look into your own community and see what are the issues there, because we've gotten a lot of media attention, but not everyone has. And there's probably a district near you that is dealing with the exact same situation.
I think that's very good advice. Very good advice. If anyone has any more questions, please add them to the chat now, and we will try to work them in. I actually have a question that harkens back to what Stephanie said earlier about kind of using books to push back against this maybe cultural pendulum swing that some parents seem to be afraid of. And I wonder if throughout this process, you have found any ways to hold compassion for the people that are trying to censor these books, because they're clearly reacting out of fear, which at NCAC is something that we see as the primary driver for censorship, be it school censorship, art censorship, political censorship. Most censorship comes from a place of fear of losing power, fear of losing control over your kid, fear of having to answer questions you're not prepared to answer, or have discussions you're not prepared to have. So I wonder if, because this has happened in sort of, it's such a community environment, and it's been such a big issue in your community for so long, if you have found ways to sort of find compassion for the censors.
It's funny you say that because I will be honest, last year I had no compassion for them. I was so angry about so many things. The fact that they tried to take away things or prevent things from happening that were providing a safer space for our students and our teachers. I was angry, and it was really hard to. And just in the last couple of days, I've started to remind myself that behavior is communication. And it was something totally unrelated. And I was like, oh, food for thought. Behavior is communication. It may not be appropriate, may not be, what they're communicating may get lost in their behavior and their words. And so I've just now started to kind of look and try and understand maybe what it is that their behavior is about. It's very hard to be compassionate. And I don't know that I'm there yet. I do definitely see a need. I do try, like, one of the reasons that I like to summarize the stories. I think Read at the Bone was one of the first ones that got read multiple times at our school board meeting. And they were so worried about the sex scene. And I was like, you totally missed the whole chapter where the teenage boy is second guessing this choice because it took way more emotional toll than he thought it would. I'm like, who wouldn't want their teenage boy to read that? We always talk about, in Texas, everything is about abstinence. All the sex ed is abstinent based. And they only talk about abstinence. But what a powerful conversation for teenage boys to read, that there are emotional costs to this type of intimacy and things like that. And so in that manner, it's like, I get that this is concerning to you, and here's the reason for it, and here's what comes after it, which is really, I think, one of the best things. My kids haven't read it. I would totally let either my 14-year-old or my 16-year-old read it, because they wouldn't read it in a silo. We'd have a whole conversation about it. But that's kind of where we've been for the last 5 or 6 years. We've been really big on talking about books and enjoying them together as a family. And it's a very different experience than when they're off learning their thing and you have no clue, and they'll bring stuff to me. So I'm trying to work on finding that compassion, but it's really hard when I see that their words and stuff and their behaviors are hurting people in my community. And so I am trying to step back and try and find out what is it they're really communicating versus, what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing probably are not really their message. There's probably something else underneath there, and how can we figure that out?
I was just going to add, I think an important thing to remember as well is that in these community conversations we had when we were reviewing the books, it's a lot harder for people to be really aggressive as they are in these board meetings when they're talking to your face. And I think it's also a lot easier for us to be compassionate towards them when we get to have those face-to-face conversations, because just like on the internet, when you see people, people have this boldness that they don't always have, and they're willing to say things that they would never say in real life to your face. And so I think that's an important part to remember too, of why it's so important that we have these actual conversations in person, because when people have 3 minutes to speak to the board or they're posting on Facebook, they're saying all of the things that they want to say and not taking into consideration the people that they're speaking to. And so I think if we can foster more of the actual communication, that's really where we can begin to see like eye to eye and find a compromise that works for everyone.
Red at the Bone by Jackie Woodson is a perfect example of what I was talking about with survival information. She's a national treasure for a reason, but that book, it's about the importance of family. No matter how broken your family is, your family is still there. It's still important, right? And I think especially nowadays in our deeply individualized society, the deep meaning of that book resonates with what Alexis said about being face to face. I'm a fan of technology. Like I said, I was a computer science teacher, but I also know that technology can often get in the way of authentic human communication. So I think we have to let our technology serve us as opposed to let our technology rule us, and maximizing the number of opportunities we have for face-to-face communication is a way to do that.
Thank you. What a fantastic, amazing panel this has been. Unfortunately, we are fresh out of time. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And I really deeply thank you to Jean, Alexis, and Stephani for being here. This has been such a great discussion. For resources about handling school censorship and what school censorship can look like, in case you're not sure what your experience is censorship, check out ncac.org, ncac.org. And you can also report book challenges and censorship incidents and ask if what you're experiencing is in fact censorship at that website as well. We have lots of great events coming up over the next week. You can see a full listing at bandbooksweek.org. Our next event, Censorship of Children's Books, a conversation with the creators of Something Happened in Our Town and One of a Kind Like Me, will be live on the Banned Books Week Facebook page on Monday, September 27th at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. We hope you'll join us and visit bandbooksweek.org for more information. Thank you so much and good night.